The autumn wind whispered through the pine trees, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and something else. Something that made Elena's heart race as she stood on the cabin's wraparound porch, her hands gripping the wooden railing, until her knuckles turned white. 3 days, 3 long, agonizing days since Marcus had disappeared into the dense Montana wilderness. 3 days since the Pax Alpha had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only torn clothing and the metallic smell of blood near Raven's Creek. Elena pulled her wool sweater tighter around her shoulders as the evening shadows grew longer. The other pack members had given up the search yesterday, convinced that whatever had taken their leader was too powerful to fight. But Elena couldn't give up, not on Marcus, not on the man who had found her broken and alone 2 years ago, who had shown her that love could exist even in a world filled with supernatural dangers. The bond between them pulsed weakly in her chest, a golden thread of connection that had grown stronger with each passing day since he'd claimed her as his mate. Now that thread felt stretched thin, barely there, like a whisper of warmth in an ice-cold room. But it was still there. He was still alive. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," came a gentle voice from behind her. Elena turned to see Sarah, approaching, the pack's healer carrying a steaming mug of tea. Sarah's kind eyes held deep concern as she joined Elena at the railing. "The bond would have broken if he was gone," Elena said quietly, accepting the warm mug with grateful hands. "I can still feel him, Sarah. He's hurt, but he's fighting." Sarah nodded slowly. Unlike the others, she understood the mystical connection between true mates. The question is, fighting what? And where? Elena took a sip of the herbal tea, tasting chamomile and something else, something that would help calm her frayed nerves, but her mind remained sharp, focused on the problem that had consumed her thoughts for days. Marcus had been investigating the strange disappearances that had plagued their territory for weeks. Hikers, campers, even some of the younger pack members had vanished without explanation. No bodies were ever found, no scent trails to follow, just empty spaces where people used to be. The last time she'd seen him, Marcus had been preparing to check the old mining caves near Hollow Ridge. The place had an unsettling reputation among the locals, stories passed down through generations about people who went in and never came out. Most dismissed these tales as superstition, but Elena had learned to trust the instincts that came with her supernatural heritage. "I know where he is," she said suddenly, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "The caves? Not just any caves, the Whispering Caverns." Elena set down her mug, her hands trembling slightly. "My grandmother used to tell stories about that place. She said it was where the veil between worlds grew thin, where ancient spirits could cross over and influence our realm." The older woman's face grew pale. "Elena, those are just legends." "Are they?" Elena challenged. "In a world where we can shift into wolves under the full moon, where we can sense each other's emotions through mystical bonds, are any stories really just legends?" The truth settled between them like a heavy stone. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening forest. "Even if you're right," Sarah said finally, "you can't go alone. If something powerful enough to capture an alpha is lurking in those caves, what chance would you have?" Elena felt the familiar fire of determination burning in her chest. "I'm not just anyone, Sarah. I'm his mate. The bond between us is stronger than any magic those caves might hold." As if responding to her words, the golden thread in her chest pulsed more strongly. Somewhere in the darkness, Marcus was calling to her. The next morning dawned grey and misty, the kind of weather that seemed to muffle sound and make everything feel dreamlike. Elena had packed light, bringing only water, a few energy bars, and the silver pendant that had belonged to her grandmother. The old woman had claimed it offered protection against malevolent spirits, and right now, Elena was willing to believe in any advantage she could get. The hike to Hollow Ridge took most of the morning. Elena moved carefully through the forest, her enhanced senses alert for any sign of danger. The normal sounds of wildlife gradually faded as she climbed higher, replaced by an eerie silence that made her skin crawl. The entrance to the Whispering Caverns yawned before her like a mouth in the mountainside, dark and forbidding. The air, coming from within, felt different, charged with an energy that made her wolf instincts howl warnings. But the bond with Marcus pulled her forward, stronger now than it had been in days. Elena switched on her flashlight and stepped into the darkness. The caverns stretched deeper than she had expected, a maze of tunnels and chambers carved from ancient stone. Strange symbols covered the walls, markings that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. The air grew colder with each step, and she could hear something that might have been voices whispering just beyond the edge of understanding. Then she saw the light. It came from a chamber ahead, a soft, unnatural glow that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Elena approached cautiously, her grandmother's pendant growing warm against her skin. The chamber opened before her like a cathedral carved from living rock. In the center, suspended in what looked like a web of silver light, was Marcus. He hung unconscious, his powerful frame held motionless by threads of energy that sparkled and hummed with otherworldly power. Around the chamber's edges, Elena could see other figures caught in similar webs, the missing hikers and pack members, all trapped in some kind of supernatural prison. Ah, the mate comes to join her beloved. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the stone walls with a sound like wind through dry leaves. Elena spun around, trying to locate the source, but saw only shadows dancing at the edge of her vision. "What do you want?" she called out, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Want? I am a collector, dear child. I collect souls, spirits, life forces to feed my endless hunger. Your alpha was particularly delicious, so full of power and determination. But you—" The voice paused, and Elena felt something invisible circle her like a predator. "You carry something different, something that might prove even more nourishing." Elena's hand closed around her grandmother's pendant, and the silver grew warm. In her palm, understanding flooded through her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "You're afraid of me," she said, and this time her voice carried the authority of absolute certainty. "You can trap them because they came here alone, separate from their source of power. But I'm not alone. I'm connected to him and through him to the entire pack." The whispers around her rose to an angry crescendo, but Elena pressed on. "The bond between true mates isn't just love," she continued, walking slowly toward Marcus's suspended form. "It's a bridge, a connection that death itself can't break. And you can't feed on something that's constantly being renewed." She reached out and touched the silver web holding Marcus, and the energy recoiled from her hand like she was made of fire. "You chose the wrong pack to hunt," Elena said, pouring all her love, all her determination, all her unshakable faith in their bond into her voice. "And you definitely chose the wrong mate to threaten." The silver threads began to dissolve, and Marcus's eyes fluttered open. Around the chamber, the other prisoners started to stir as the entity's hold on them weakened. The ancient spirit's scream of rage and frustration echoed through the caverns as its carefully gathered feast slipped away. But Elena barely heard it. All her attention was focused on Marcus as he dropped gently to the chamber floor, alive and whole and safe. When he looked up at her, his dark eyes full of wonder and love, Elena knew that no supernatural force in any realm could ever be strong enough to break what they had built together. "I knew you'd come," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. "Always," she whispered back, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Together, they led the other, survivors out of the darkness and back into the light, their bond stronger than ever, tested by shadow and proved by love.